Welcome to Aspen Ignites, Conversations to Build a Better World, a series from the Aspen Institute that brings together thoughtful people with diverse backgrounds and points of view. This conversation features leaders from the Center for Native American Youth at the Aspen Institute. Sally Jewell is on the center's advisory board, Nikki Santos is its executive director, and Charitie Ropati is vice chair. They spoke about Indigenous climate solutions.
Why do you believe Native youth are so important when it comes to the climate movement, when it comes to climate solutions?
Well, around the world, if you look at the places that have the most intact, healthy nature, ecosystems, biodiversity, they are the places that have been in continuous stewardship by Indigenous communities for, as long as people have roamed this earth. And I think it's because Indigenous people view themselves as being very much a part of nature and have evolved with nature. And as someone that did not grow up Indigenous, or someone that grew up with a traditional colonial background, and I'm an immigrant myself, but from the UK, it took me a long time to realize just how our system undermines those very things that we rely on to be healthy as human beings, and the importance of all the other critters that don't have voices to protect this planet for them. And Indigenous voices are the most clear, the most proven, and the most effective. And in terms of Indigenous youth, this is your future, and it's part of my generation's obligation to try and reverse the course we're on and be on a more sustainable trajectory. So it's just so important that we support organizations like the Center for Native American Youth, and we support youth voices.
That's powerful. Indigenous people comprise of less than 5% of the population. However, we protect and preserve over 80% of our world's biodiversity. It's because, as Sally was talking about, our ways of being in relation with the land, water, and all of our animal relatives. It's not extractive. We treat this land, the air, like our relative. And Indigenous solutions are crucial because when we stop thinking of land as something that we own, but rather as our relative, I think that's when transformation really starts. Now, Native youth have an instrumental role. We're seeing across our world young people leading in movements, from getting their communities to the ballot box, from protecting, getting clean water in Flint, Michigan, and more. And young people have a voice, and it's our responsibility to provide a platform and amplify with their truth so we can be a collective catalyst for change and protecting the planet. And yourself, Charitie, the amazing work that you are doing at such a young age is exactly why we need programs and opportunities for young voices like yourself.
Thank you. That means a lot. And just to share a story with everyone, I remember being 17 and coming to DC for the first time. It was like one of my first times kind of heading out from the state of Alaska. Just because when you come from like a low income family, it was really cool being in the East Coast and meeting the both of you for the first time and realizing that there is power in my voice, and that work in education equity, or like work in bringing access to like skateboarding, all of these different sectors are also rooted in climate justice. And I just wanted to ask if you can share examples of stories of Indigenous youth who are doing great things here with CNA, things that you have seen during your time as Secretary of Interior.
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, well, an amazing example, which kind of got lost in all the media around the Standing Rock and the Oseti Sakawan camp and the protest over placement of the Dakota Access Pipeline, was actually catalyzed by Indigenous youth from Standing Rock. They literally took petitions from the reservation and they ran with their own legs all the way from North Dakota to Washington, D.C. to deliver the petition to say, please don't permit this crossing of Lake Oahe, which, by the way, was a created by a dam that was placed to flood indigenous lands, so it didn't flood the settlers' land downriver. It should have gone the most direct route north of Bismarck, North Dakota, but the people in North Dakota, in Bismarck, didn't want it upstream of their water supply, so they put it upstream of the tribe's water supply. It was indigenous youth that catalyzed that movement that so many people were aware of. And so youth voices are really, really important. And so many examples, canoe journey in my home state of Washington, the activism of our elders who are now gone from us, like Billy Frank Jr., who as a young person started getting arrested for upholding his treaty rights for fishing, that completely changed the landscape of how fish are managed, which are now done by the Northwest Intertribal Fisheries Commission in my home state. And it really started when Billy was a youth, just as the situation around Standing Rock raised people around the country's awareness of indigenous rights, catalyzed by youth voices to begin with.
Those are such powerful examples. I'm thinking about one of your peers, Anthony Temez, who is, as a young person, raised in the city of Chicago, realizing the power in connecting to traditional plants and medicines. Now, for those who are familiar with concrete jungle, there's limited opportunity to get in the outdoors, nonetheless be able to connect with your traditional plants and medicines. And so he worked with the city, got a small plot of land, and just started planting seeds. Now that grew to a larger plot, and they have a teepee, they have sage, their traditional plants, tobacco, and so much more. He's now been featured in Men's Health magazine and these huge platforms that he wrote for the United Nations. And it all started because he saw a need in his community, and he worked hard to create this vision of what he wanted for himself, his younger siblings, and the Native community in the city of Chicago. Now, he just shared with us that they just got a large amount of money approved for the farm. And we're just so proud to play a small role in supporting his advocacy, giving him a platform, connecting him to people who he needed to so he could advance his cause.
Mm-hmm. And that's great to hear. Knowing Anthony personally, I just want people to know and understand that, these stories aren't isolated, that Native youth activism works, it's possible. And when it comes to Indigenous land management, that's talked about at the United Nations. Who leads those initiatives? It's Indigenous youth, not only here in the United States, but also internationally. I also wanted to ask you guys, talked a little bit about Indigenous ecological knowledge. Why do you feel that's important? We all know why it's important, but why do you feel it's important in educational spaces, policy spaces, but especially in sustainability and what we're seeing with the climate crisis?
Do you want to go first this time?
When I think about traditional ecological knowledge, as a Native woman, it's really hard for me to separate my reality and my upbringing and what is in my blood and I inherently know to be true with anything else. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to me and it's important to you and to Indigenous people because it's in our blood. Mm-hmm. It is our connector to the land, all of its relatives, the water. I couldn't imagine not thinking, through a traditional or Indigenous lens. So it's difficult for me to put into words on why it would be so important because it's embedded in our DNA. Mm. When I even think about my daughter for her first time ever going back to our traditional homelands and having a welcoming home ceremony for her so she would be able to touch the water, so she could be able to be on the land and feel that connection, so she wouldn't go longing for it when we're back at home in Washington, D.C. That's traditional ecological knowledge. I think about times when we call on our ancestors to come be with us, and they come with us, they come visit us, through the wind or through different opportunities. Everything that we have that connects us as Native people comes through the outdoors and the resources. Mm-hmm. So I'm really having a difficult time answering this because it's just inherently part of us. Mm-hmm. But
it's not inherently part of my culture, so I can't answer this. I want to use a couple of examples. One is another champion for change from CNA, and that is Mariah Gladstone. Mm-hmm. So Mariah is from the Blackfeet Nation. I got to know her well because one of the sort of fun honorific things you get to do as Secretary of the Interior is you might get a submarine that you are the sponsor of. So I am, the USS Montana, and I am not from Montana, and I asked Mariah Gladstone to be my maid of honor. So she smudged the submarine. As its keel was being laid, she participated in the christening with a native prayer and in the commissioning of the submarine. She created an organization called Indigikitchen, Indigenous Digital Kitchen. She's got a master's degree in environmental engineering, I think. She is deeply engaged in the importance of native foods, but also reintroducing them to many native cultures who have been disconnected, who live in food deserts, like so many urban populations, to take readily accessible foods from the grocery store with native foods and blend them together into delicious recipes to help get people of all ages, but particularly young people, eating indigenous again and recognizing the importance of what they eat to who they are. So she's been an amazing bridge. And the other example I want to give you is from corporate America. So I'm on the board of Costco. The head of sustainability for Costco, Sherry Fleece, has asked all of her managers to read a book, Braiding Sweetgrass, by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is a traditionally trained Western scientist in botany, who is a professor at SUNY Albany, but also a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, who has come as an adult to learn her language and native culture and work with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy in her area to raise awareness about traditional ecological knowledge through her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which is such a wonderful, eye-opening experience for those of us like me that did not grow up like that to recognize how we do not honor our place on this planet and how important it is for us to take only what is necessary and not take the first or the last, but how humans have actually shaped these landscapes in a way where the landscapes need us. And Mariah, just day before yesterday, sent me a video of the bison herd being released into wildlands with no fences for the first time in hundreds of years. And the number of people, just so spiritually connected to watching these 30 or so buffalo and the young ones run out toward Chief Mountain, which Mariah took me and my husband up, which is just amazing and something I think we can all take inspiration to. So a couple of examples, one my age and the other your age, that are having a big impact.
No, that's great. I actually know Mariah personally too because she helped kind of set the place for Columbia University to finally attain a brownstone for Native students. And it's going to be there forever now. And it's a space that solely serves Native students. And it's one of the largest spaces now. So
Wonderful.
Your daughter can come to you and it's a wonderful place to stay. I guess, what do you guys think are some of the barriers that Native youth face when entering the climate movement, when advocating on behalf of their communities related to the climate crisis?
I think as a society, Native people, and especially Native youth, are still combating invisibility. We are constantly marked in data as other or something else. Now, we also have yet to reckon with traditional knowledge systems that we've been talking about as a leader in addressing climate. And when you're combating invisibility, a perception where your voice may not be valued, and especially young people who have very limited opportunities to actually have a seat at the table or in a position of power, those can be very difficult barriers to navigate. Now, when you add in the factors that Indigenous people have at home, whether it's geographic isolation, lack of economic opportunity, education opportunity, mental health disparities, it really exacerbates the invisibility. And though those perceptions and that data can get us down, what I'm really proud that we do at the Center for Native American Youth is we shine a light, we uplift, and we come from an empowerment model that is rooted in culture. And so when we start normalizing young people leading with culture and using that as a protective factor, we're able to break through those barriers.
So well said. It's easy to default to despair. And it's easy to say the issues are just too big. because what Native youth face within their communities is extraordinarily difficult, and many have few role models, and in some cases, few functional adults to turn to. And yet, there is a resilience and a perseverance that is just extraordinary. And what I love about the work of the Center for Native American Youth is so many of the young people that you work with, that you inspire, that you are a part of yourselves, have uplifted so many others because you show that despite hardship and challenges, your voices are important. And I think where imposter syndrome is not uncommon, particularly in underrepresented groups, it is particularly acute in Native communities. And what I want to say is, you have no idea how powerful your voices are. And the Center for Native American Youth gives young people that platform to know that their voices really matter. And here at the Aspen Ideas Fest, we just, held this session where the participation with youth was electric and uplifting. And that's because I think these young people had permission to share their voices and didn't recognize something that I recognize, not as a young person, how powerful their voices are. So I think that without programs like this, without the support of programs like this to enable young people to come to Washington, D.C., like we did with the Native Youth Summit, headlined by Michelle Obama when I was working for President Obama as secretary, they don't see themselves in this picture. They're not inclined to vote. They're not inclined to participate because why does it matter? And you make it matter, and you help them understand that they count in censuses and that they have an opportunity to vote and that their voice is important. And that is incredibly inspiring, and I am most grateful.
Thank you. When you were speaking, it made me think of just how you were saying we cannot let these barriers overcome us. And with the young people that we have the honor of working with to help them unlock what they already have inside of them. I was visiting with some of my relatives who are elders about the work that they do, and they said, you know what you're doing? You're not just healing the future generations to come, you're healing all of our ancestors who never had that chance to heal. So what we're creating is a healing movement, and we are creating strong shoulders for the next generation, for the youth to come.
Yeah, that's so great to hear. That almost brought me to tears, and I for sure wouldn't have the voice I do now without you and yourself too, and the Center for Native American Youth. And I guess my last question is, you guys were talking about a little bit, but ways we could support Native youth in ways other organizations, governmental institutions, academia can support Native youth.
You did bring me to tears, so here we go. I think that in part because of this movement, there is a growing awareness and a growing desire among organizations. I mean, I'm on the board of the Nature Conservancy. Mm-hmm. It wants to hear Native youth. It's got Indigenous people in local communities, and it's trying to reach out. It's trying to get youth voices engaged at a board level, in local communities. It wants to learn what it doesn't know. I've just had a taste, right? And I'm still very much on a learning journey. And I think that learning journey is so much stronger now than it was last year or the year before. And maybe it's, some of the division in our country and a desire to heal, but the time is now. And for those who have money and resources, I just encourage them to support this work. Support this work here, engage with their local tribal communities, prior informed consent, ask them up front. It's all really important.
I think the power of what we do at the Center for Native American Youth is we allow Native youth to come as they are, leading how you, Charitie, as a Yupik Samoan young person with so much experience, you do not have to conform to what we think a leader looks like. You come as yourself, and we love, honor, and respect you for that leader that you are. And I think more organizations, when they want to engage with Native youth, they need to honor and respect these young people for who they are, not just for who they want to be or who might check a box. And when I think about even investment, whether or inclusion at institutions, they need to be doing the same. And they need to be honoring Indigenous culture and realize that it may not look the same, our values may not look the same as what predominant white society tells us that our values are supposed to look like. I also feel, last night I heard an amazing, fierce Native woman, Vanessa Roanhorse, say, and for philanthropy, when you're investing in BIPOC, don't forget the I.
I love that.
No, that's great to hear. I know for me, I keep saying this throughout all of this, but I would not be where I am without those whose shoulders I stood upon. And it's definitely been the both of you. And again, I want to thank you for your time of being in conversation with me, for being in community with me, and just reminding folks that when you invest in the dreams of Native youth, of Native kids, that is rooted in climate justice. And you can go anywhere with that. So thank you again. And yeah.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about this cultural teaching I had heard, and just because we have a space of three of us of multiple generations, that we were taught that when we are young, we are sacred. And when we are older, you know, our elders, you're not an elder, but when we are elders, we are sacred. And at no point in time in our lives do we lose that sacredness. And so I just want us to all remember of the power and the inherent sacredness that we carry as individuals, and remind anybody else of that knowledge as well.
I take my role as an almost elder very
And Susanne.
seriously because I don't, because we can't get where we need to go without my generation remaining engaged, remaining supportive, using the resources that we have to help this next generation forward. So, and Charitie, it's great to be in conversation with you, and I love that the youngest among us is the one leading us.
Thank you. I've learned so much today. Thank you both. And again, so thankful to be in community with you and to meet up again here in Aspen.